First steps in the higher life. Step 6. In James Allen's book, Out from the Heart, my name is Steve Van Eiderstein, and welcome to the Narrowing Path, Walking the Spiritual Walk. We are on step 6 out of 10 from James Allen's book, Out from the Heart. We're actually, and the chapter title for this is actually the first steps in the higher life. These steps are associated with just one chapter of this book. Though there's a lot of great stuff in it. I might be doing more out of this book as we go forward, right? So the 10 steps that James Allen proposes are the first 2 steps were regarding discipline of the body and vices of the body, and then the lesson was the discipline of the body. And then we're into the second lesson, which is vices of the tongue. So we are disciplining the tongue. And the first one of this lesson was about slander. The second step was about gossip. And last week, we talked about abusive and unkind speech. And let me tell you, these 3 first lessons have been huge. They've been extremely, extremely enlightening, and has increased my awareness of things significantly. So I'm really grateful to be going through this with y'all as we continue to trek this road of spiritual growth and taking steps towards a higher way of living. And so I'm really grateful for it. So give us a like, give us a subscribe, a follow, whatever you're following us on. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, obviously here YouTube, and also we do have pages for TikTok, X, Facebook, and Instagram. So we are also on Amazon Music too. I forget about that one all the time. But if you want to go ahead, give us a follow, whatever platform you're listening from, we'd greatly appreciate it. So thank you so much for joining us. I will be reading out from this copy of the book, Out from the Heart, by James Allen. This is around the 1910s to 1920s. I think it's around 1914, but I do not have an official date for it yet. I'm not sure if I'll ever have an official one, but it's around that time period. And you can also follow along in this copy. This is a mass reproduction from Amazon. There's a lot of them. Most of them are pretty good. I like to go back to the originals as much as I can, or as close to the originals as possible, just for the integrity of the information. So please forgive me if I have to clear my throat for some reason. Got some a tickle in my throat, so I appreciate it. So now here we go. We're going to go read the 4th step in disciplining the tongue, which is really step 6 out of the 10, but this is the 4th one in this lesson. So here we go. This is James Allen's Out from the Heart, chapter 5, first steps in the higher life. And we're reading about overcoming levity and irreverent speech. Here we go. The next step is the overcoming of levity or irreverent speech. Light and frivolous talking, the repeating of coarse jokes, the telling of vulgar stories having no other purpose than to raise an empty laugh, offensive familiarity, and the employment of contemptuous and irreverent terms when speaking to or of others, and particularly of one's elders and those who rank as one's teachers, guardians, or superiors. All this will be put away by the love of virtue and truth. Upon the altar of irreverence, absent friends and companions are immolated for the passing excitement of a momentary laugh, and all the sanctity of life is sacrificed to the zest for ridicule. When respect towards others and the giving of reverence where reverence is due are abandoned, virtue is abandoned. When modesty, gravity, and dignity are eliminated from speech and behavior, truth is lost. Yea, even its entrance gate is hidden away and forgotten. Irreverence is degrading, even in the young. But when it accompanies gray hairs and appears in the demeanor of the preacher, this is indeed a piteous spectacle. And when this can be imitated and followed after, then are the blind leading the blind. Then have elders and preacher and people lost their way. The virtuous man will be of grave and reverent speech. He will think and speak of the absent as he thinks and speaks of the dead, tenderly and sacredly. He will put away thoughtlessness and watch that he does not sacrifice his dignity to gratify a passing impulse to lightness and frivolity. His mirth will be pure and innocent, and his voice will become subdued and musical, and his soul will be filled with grace and sweetness as he succeeds in conducting himself as becomes a man of truth. And there we go. I just noticed. This is why I go back to these original texts. And all the times I read this, it says here, his mirth will be pure and innocent. And in this reproduction copy, it says his humor will be pure and innocent. So, given we have a discrepancy, let me go ahead. I'm going to mark this for us so I can remember it if I ever go through this again with this specific copy. And what we're going to do, we're going to look up mirth right on the podcast with you. So what I have, and this is actually very relevant. This is a 1929 Webster's. Let me see if I can get a glare on it so you can see it. Not too much. It's a Webster's Collegiate and Home Dictionary, and Office Dictionary. So this lesson, we'll say, this episode, this step had a lot of words that contextually you could probably understand. At least I felt like I could, but I wanted to look up. So what we're going to do is we're going to look up mirth because we already have this out and we were already going to be talking about word definitions anyway. So let's take a look. So it replaced mirth with humor in the reprint. So yeah, it's kind of falling apart on me here. Here we are. Mirth, noisy, gaiety, social merriment, hilarity, jollity. So an overall feeling of positivity, an overall joyousness, a happiness, a contentment for life. So that's interesting. It's interesting. See, that it's very odd because the word humor gives it a different tone, doesn't it? And this happens from time to time. Like I said, that's why it's important to me that I go back and take a look at the original text. In the book James Allen, As a Man Thinketh, which is one of my favorite books of all time, he talks, the last page, one of the last sentences, it talks about the bark of your soul. And in the newest translations, it spells bark, B-A-R-K, and it takes away from like the substance of the line, because in the original text it was spelled B-A-R-Q-U-E, which is a boat. So in the ship of your soul, like where you're heading and where you're gliding. So it was a much different meaning, but you lose it sometimes. Which is why it's important we take an honest look at these things. And that was one of the ones that I missed. So I'm glad we did that reading together today. So let's go ahead and let's get into it, because I feel like this is difficult for people. This is one that I went through, and as I was going through writing this podcast and kind of getting my thoughts gathered around it, this is something so many people do, they don't even realize it's a problem. Like when you're slandering somebody, that's not good. When you're gossiping, we know in general gossiping is not good. We just enjoy doing it, right? When we have mean and hateful words and angry words and abusive speech, we know that's really not good. This one, though, levity, which is defined as lightness of disposition or conduct, right? This was one of the words I looked up because I wanted to, and I looked it up out of this dictionary as well. I probably should actually get one that's even closer to the earlier 1900s, like 1905 or somewhere around there, because that's where James Allen was actually writing. And 20 years, especially in those days, can make a very large difference as to verbiage and definition and intention, because James Allen was very intentional about everything that he wrote. And he was like that because, first of all, it was expensive to reproduce books, to put it into production. So every page increased cost significantly. So I love reading James Allen because it's to the point. There's not much fluff. He's very direct. And he just gives you the message. He doesn't care if he likes it or not. He doesn't try to sugarcoat it for you. He gives you truth. And I appreciate that. So it's important to me that I look up the definitions of the words he uses if I have any gray area about it. So levity, is lightness of disposition or conduct, inconsistency, trifling, merriment, or pleasure, right? Just trying to make something light, to make fun of or to make light of something, to merriment or pleasure, like just to bring some excitement, energy into something, right? And it said inconsistency as well. So like levity is intentionally bringing merriment, pleasure, excitement, laughter into a difficult conversation. So it's inconsistent with the conversation. So, and a lot of people do this. A lot of people feel like it's a skill to lighten the mood. A lot of people feel like it's something that's essential. And I do. Sometimes I feel like it's to break the ice, right? To break the tension in the room and everything like that. But what James Allen's going to be getting at and what we're talking about here is like, that's not always appropriate. Most of the time that's not appropriate. If language in a conversation is drawing to a sense of heaviness and purposefulness and gravity, then it should stay that way. We shouldn't rock the boat. We should let the conversation continue to develop and cultivate naturally as to what it is, not just try to make ourselves feel more comfortable by injecting some levity. And now he also talked about picking on people and using and making jokes at the expense of other people. Now, I know people whose entire conversational structure, it revolves around making jokes about their friends, pretty harsh jokes at times, or making dirty jokes, or retelling fantastical, ridiculous stories. And this step tells us we shouldn't be doing that. Now that is difficult because us human beings, us social creatures, we like to have fun. We like to laugh. We like to bolster our ego and our pride and tell these incredible stories and with embellished facts. And there's a lot of people that are going to hear this and probably push back. And I fully expect that because in my head, I initially did as well. I initially was like, I'm not sure. I don't know if that's what we need to be doing here. And after really tearing this apart again and taking an honest look at it, I have to agree with what James Allen says here and the points that he's making. So if you heard that first reading and then you came back to it, or you were sitting there thinking, hey, well, how am I going to have a conversation? Then this lesson is for you. This episode is for you, because a lot of us are in that boat. I've been in that boat. My speech has changed quite a bit since I've started taking these lessons seriously. But this is one that I'm be completely transparent with you on. I didn't even really, I don't think I really truly understood it till going through it this time, which is kind of amazing. because I've read this book multiple times before. I've tried to apply these principles multiple times before, but this has given me a different context and a different way to look at things, and a different understanding of why this needs to be done. So, if you heard this and you're like, I don't know, but that's just how I have conversation. What am I supposed to do now? Then, yeah, this is for you. This is to help you, to give you some hope and give you some instruction and how to change. And I know I needed it when I got to after reading this step, and I know I've needed it a long time. Even though I've gotten better at it, I obviously still got some kinks to work out. So, what I'd like to do, like I said, is start with a few definitions. We just looked up mirth. We just talked about the definition of levity. He also uses the word irreverent, which is lacking in respect, honor, dignity, veneration. Also is a word that was associated. So if something's irreverent, it's lacking all that. If something is reverent, it is including those things, including dignity, respect, honor, and a venerable or veneration. So another word used regularly in these couple of paragraphs. And then the last word I wanted to give a definition of is immolate. That was in the second paragraph. So we'll touch on that in a little bit here, but immolate is to kill as a sacrificial victim, to offer as a sacrifice to something, which is quite a big word to be using in the context that we're talking about. So I'm excited to get to that point with you. So let's go ahead and we'll dive into the actual reading. This might be a little bit longer than your usual episode, so bear with me if it goes long. The first line, this is a 3-paragraph long reading, and the first line opens with, the next step is the overcoming of levity and irreverent speech, or irreverent speech. So we're talking about the definitions, right? We're talking about lacking respect, honor, and dignity, lightness of disposition or conduct, inconsistency, trifling, merriment, or pleasure, right? So to restate what he said with the definitions in it is to overcome levity, which is speech done just to entertain ourselves for laugh or pleasure, to reduce the seriousness of something. Okay? A little bit more of a layman's term for the definition of levity from what James Allen's definitions was then. That's more easily digested for me, at least. And then for irreverent speech, he's saying speech that does not display any respect, dignity, or honor to others or the subject that is being referred to. So it's let's put it all together, I guess. The next step is the overcoming of speech done just to entertain ourselves for laugh or pleasure, or to reduce the seriousness of a situation or a conversation, or speech that does not display any respect, dignity, honor to others. All right. Makes sense to me. When I went and got the definitions and I really looked them over, I was like, okay, I can get behind this, actually. So it's kind of new territory for a lot of people, including myself. The corners of this were new for me. So, and then he then leads into giving us some examples, a little bit more clarification as to what he's talking about here. And it's the first thing, I'm going to read all 4 of them out. He has it in like a semicoloned out sentence. So the first thing was light and frivolous talking, right? Was the first example. Then the repeating of coarse jokes. Then the telling of vulgar stories, having no other purpose than to raise an empty laugh. Then offensive familiarity and the employment of contemptuous and irreverent terms when speaking to or of others, and particularly of one's elders and those who rank as one's teachers, guardians, or superiors. All this will be put away by the lover of virtue and truth. So again, that last sentence qualifies our willingness to actually practice this, right? Because if you have no intention to grow spiritually, if you have no desire to pursue virtue or truth, then you're not going to want to do this. You'll probably enjoy it too much to actually even consider letting it go. But if you are a person in pursuit of virtue and truth and love, then this is something you're going to have to take a look at and you're going to have to begin to practice. So the first thing he gives us that we have to stop and we have to change is the light and frivolous talking. Now, this was touched on lightly in another episode earlier, and we're talking about light and frivolous talking. We're meaning like this, the water cooler talk at work, any foolish or pointless conversation, and we're talking just to talk or out of a sense of obligation or poor boundaries, right? Like there's a lot of people that just fill the air. There's a lot of people that just feel obligated to engage in small talk conversation about nothing when an appropriate, hey, how you doing? And walk away will be just as acceptable, and the person wouldn't even have a slight awareness, right? But we have these insecurities that we feel like we need to fill the conversation. We need to be our idea of pleasant and inviting is to engage in these light and frivolous conversations that have no impact. They waste only time, and it's just noise. It has no intention. It has no purpose. It has nothing to do with forward living and virtuous living. It's just a waste of time. So the first thing Alan gives us is light and frivolous talking. We need to get rid of it. Just if it doesn't accomplish a goal and it's not a pleasantry, then there's no point in having the conversation. There isn't. The next thing is the repeating of coarse jokes. Now, like I said, there is entire demographics of people that survive on dirty jokes. This is crude and dirty jokes that are the things we're talking about here that need to stop. We need to quit repeating them. We need to quit practicing this lack of what in the four absolute terminology would probably call a lack of purity or a lack of decency and appropriateness, right? So this can not just be sexual jokes either. I want to say this can be racist jokes. These can be all ill-taste jokes that people like to just repeat because they find them funny. They find them degrading sometimes. They find them ridiculous enough that they want to continue to get a laugh out of people for them, right? So the joke has no goal. There is no reason to say it. It's just to contribute to a dynamic that's going on. It's just to selfishly drive conversation or to seek approval or to gain something from it. This is something that we just need to stop doing. It doesn't foster anything but ill intentions, or it nurtures poor behaviors and keeps alive a lot of these inappropriate ways of thinking that we need to let go of. So when it says coarse jokes, not only is it like the lewd and ridiculous ones that we've all have said. Everyone's said jokes that they might reflect on even relatively quickly afterwards and say, I should never say that again. I shouldn't have done that. That wasn't appropriate. That wasn't right. Now I'm worried. Right? It's pointless. It causes conflicts. It can cause sensitivity for some people. Right? Not that that's necessarily something you need to take a look at, but it's definitely not the other people's sensitivity. You can't just insulate them from the world, which I understand. But at the same time, that's nothing we need to be saying. It's not a virtuous thing to do. It's not a ethical, morally right thing to do if we're just making crude jokes and coarse jokes all the time. So There's a lot of people that aren't going to like that one. And if you had asked me at one time, I wouldn't have liked that one either. So I understand where many might be coming from if they find that to be off-putting. And then the third one was the telling of vulgar stories, having no other purpose than to raise an empty laugh. Now, this means any personal story only told to provoke a laugh and laughter, and to be the life of the party, to get people to like you, to get people to your side, to validate your own ego or your own prestige and popularity, right? So this is just a story told only to suit oneself and further oneself's selfish ambition, rather than to further one's personal sense of, or personal practice in virtue and truth. And remember, vulgar can mean a lot of things. It's definitionally, I think I looked it up in here. It's unrefined or offensive. And many people associate it with, again, sexual themes, but this can be much more than that. Vulgar can mean things like crime. Vulgarity can be violence. It can be disgusting things, maybe, right? Vulgarity actually covers quite a few areas for people. Vulgarity covers a lot of different things, and a lot of us love talking about that stuff. And even when we're talking about the serial killer shows, that's vulgar. That's violence. That's talking about death and dismemberment and emotional breaks and this and that. And it's become normalized in our society. So many people talk about vulgar things that are not appropriate. Some might find offensive, but they're unrefined. And when it's only done to entertain ourselves, this is a problem, right? It goes along with the dirty jokes. It goes along with the fill in the air conversation, right? This is stuff that needs to stop. This is unproductive conversation about vulgar topics that help no one move forward. We only talk about it for our own enjoyment. We only talk about this stuff to achieve a certain selfish, self-centered goal, which is not what we're supposed to be doing with this stuff. These are examples of levity or irreverent speech. And this would probably fall under the category of irreverent speech, right? Because this is not appropriate speech. This doesn't lack dignity, doesn't lack honor. This doesn't have dignity. It doesn't have honor. It doesn't have respect. Vulgar things have none of that. There's no seriousness and depth and weight and purpose to the constant talk about that kind of stuff, whether it's fantasy or real, whether it's documentary or just passing time, I guess. It's stuff that we've grown to sensationalize in a lot of areas of the world and in our lives. And it gives us a little bit of a rush. It gives us a little bit of this pleasure feeling, this like you're almost coming close to danger and risk and chance from talking about vulgar things. And it gives us this selfish and self-centered gratification from having these kind of conversations. So that's something we need to stop, because it does nothing to actually progress people forward, especially when it was only said to be entertaining or get a laugh, right? Get a reaction of some sort. Now, the fourth example that James Allen gave us was the offensive familiarity and the employment of contemptuous and irreverent terms when speaking to or of others, and particularly of one's elders and those who rank as one's teachers, guardians, or superiors, right? So offensive familiarity, which that's an interesting term, isn't it? That's an interesting combination of words there. So lastly is this offensive familiarity, and that use of irreverent terms when speaking about someone there or not there. And when I looked up familiarity, it was talked about intimacy. And what I realized is this is what people do all the time. They take personal information that they know about them, usually from a relationship that's existing, right? Like we talked about slander, where people make up conjecture and they try to be suggestive about what can happen with a person. We talked about gossip, where someone's just passing along information that they've heard from a third source, and they're just kind of using it to keep themselves distracted. But what we're talking about here is offensive familiarity. So when someone knows you intimately and they use it, they weaponize it. People talk about this all the time. I realize this is what they talk about. You use the things I've told you against me, right? Like they intentionally cause harm with this information that they're privy to that was given to them in confidence from that person. And then they refer to them in this degrading way, or this disrespectful, disingenuous, dishonoring way. And they use it for a laugh. They use it at the expense of the other person. Well, yeah, like I said, whether it's to their face or not, like they still doing it at their expense. And the person might not be okay with that. That's a betrayal of trust right there. There's no dignity, honor, or respect given to the other individual. And it's sad that we'll do that just to laugh. We'll do that just to get a reaction. We'll betray someone's trust for a momentary feeling of relevancy. Now, I don't know about you, but that is heartbreaking. That is heartbreaking. So when we go over these 4 examples that he gave us, so we need to recognize that these things need to stop. The frivolous, empty talk, that goes nowhere. The coarse jokes, dirty jokes, the inappropriate jokes, the stories we tell that are vulgar about things we don't need to be talking about, and then the betrayal of trust and confidence of those we are close to for a quick laugh and entertainment purposes. Those need to stop if we want to pursue virtue and truth. Those things need to go away if we want to pursue virtue and truth. We need to speak differently. And we'll go into what that is later on, but we need to be intentional and not practice levity, not practice irreverence towards others. Right? He goes on to say, upon the altar of irreverence, this is the beginning of the next paragraph, actually. Upon the altar of irreverence, absent friends and companions are immolated. There's that word I looked up and we were talking about. For the passing excitement of a momentary laugh. And all the sanctity of life is sacrificed for the zest of ridicule. Immolated. We sacrifice. We given sacrifice to is the victim, right? Like, what a word. It sounds like that word is written in fire whenever I think about it. And, immolated. It's we are throwing people under the bus. We are betraying their trust, betraying their confidence. We are sacrificing people to the altar of ego and pride and popularity and prestige and an empty laugh and acceptance of a group, right? We'll put our friends on the chopping block for little more than someone else's entertainment. A stranger's approval a lot of times becomes more important than a friend's confidence. How sad is that? How sad is that? And we do this under the guise of, oh, we're friends. It'll be okay. They'll understand, or they won't mind. Who are you to make that decision? Who was I to make that decision? I've done this before. Not proud to admit it, but it's part of my story. Because I used to be manipulative. I used to be somebody that would try to weasel my way into whatever I needed, and that means betraying someone's confidence to try to influence your opinion on somebody. I would do that. I'd present it as a joke. I would try to get you to buy into it involuntarily through comedy or through presentation. I used to do this. And you can harm people. You can scar them. You can betray the trust on such a deep level that they won't trust for a long time because of doing this. And just because we want someone's approval in a moment, or we want to achieve our own selfish ends, our own self-centered desires. It's just such an incredibly selfish thing to do, just to momentarily get a rush of excitement, to get a thrill. I love that it said zest for ridicule, right? The excitement of a momentary laugh. You're going to destroy, or potentially at least destroy, a relationship for what? For literally nothing. To add ridicule for personal enjoyment? To be a bully, really? To somebody? It's so sad what we take for granted. And it's sad that these types of moments show our value system. It shows how much we care about people and how much character we don't actually have. You know, developing virtuous character is really what we're talking about when we're talking about developing spiritual living and behaviors and virtues and practicing these things, right? There's a lot of things we talk that we're wrapping up into this, but in the end, it's developing a virtuous character that we want to actually participate in, right? And we want to be like all the time. And when you honestly look at yourself, and if you see yourself practicing these things regularly, it unfortunately is going to tell you that your character is not nearly as good as you think it is. You are not nearly as virtuous as you think you are. You are not nearly as forward moving, or not moving. You're not moving as quickly forward as you've maybe deluded yourself into thinking. So really, you've got to use these examples that James Allen is giving us as an opportunity to validate, or to more so do an inventory against, to see where you're at and to see what you need to do so you stop blocking yourself from virtue and truth and growth and character and love and spirituality. Because these things will block you to any personal growth and development. This is an area so many of us need to look at. So many people need to actually engage in. We need to actually have a true and honest inventory and appraisal of ourselves here, right? There's a lot of humility that gets wrapped up into this honesty piece. We have to take a real look at ourselves and say, do I do this? And is it for the reason James Allen's saying? And if you're doing it, James Allen's right on the money with this. He's almost always right on the money, which blows my mind, but especially with this kind of stuff. And if you realize most of your conversation is going to have to change after talking about this step, that's encouraging and discouraging all at the same time. Discouraging because you thought you were doing better, and you are doing better. Don't take away that credit from yourself, but encouraging because guess what? Look at all the space you get to improve with. Every single one of these things that you do that you want to change and do differently is the opportunity to grow, is the opportunity to move forward. Thank God for that. What a beautiful opportunity that is. What an amazing thing to find an area of your life that you get to focus on, and you can find substantial growth and character development and virtue implementation. What a beautiful, beautiful thing. Then Alan goes on to say, when respect towards others and the giving of reverence where reverence is due are abandoned, virtue is abandoned. Now that's a big statement. We don't get to take a break on this. We don't get to disrespect, dishonor, to break down other people, to treat them disgracefully. We must always conduct ourselves, our thoughts, our words, our actions in virtuous ways. So when he says when respect towards others and the giving of reverence where reverence is due is abandoned. So when we stop doing that, knowingly most of the time, we stop doing that, virtue is abandoned. When we don't choose to practice the virtues in certain situations, we might as well not practice them at all. We can't claim virtue and then choose not to have it and choose not to practice it. That means you're only doing it when it's convenient. That means you're not actually truly embracing what it means to be a virtuous, righteous, Christ-like person, good person, loving person. If you're choosing to not pay respect and honor and dignity to all the human beings you come across in your life, if you are not practicing those virtues with absolutely everybody, then you're just abandoning virtue altogether. Because virtue is not meant to be selectively practiced. It is supposed to be always and forever implemented and to be developed as a part of your internal character as to who you are. And a lot of people lose that. Right? We have to believe in this virtuous living and then implement it and choose this virtuous life, regardless of situation and circumstances, and really take these lessons to heart. Because to abandon virtue, that's a scary thought. And he goes on to say another terrifying thought, right? When modesty, gravity, and dignity are eliminated from speech and behavior, truth is lost. Yeah, even its entrance gate is hidden and away and forgotten. What a huge statement that is. Truth is lost. We've just abandoned virtue and truth is lost. They go hand in hand. You cannot pursue truth and have truth and not be virtuous. Virtue needs to be practiced prior to the discovery and the embracement of truth. Truth shows up through virtue. Some might say God shows up through virtue. So we need to embrace this. We need to continue to develop that, right? And to lose truth. Truth is lost. And not even truth is lost. The entrance is covered. We can't even navigate our way back to truth to let it back into our lives unless we practice virtue, unless we practice a little bit of modesty, gravity, and dignity, right? Unless we conduct our speech with reverence. What a horrible thing to do, to lose truth. What a scary, scary thought. And what's interesting about the three things that it says is when modesty, gravity, and dignity are eliminated from speech and behavior, right? Modesty, gravity, dignity. Those are three things that are aspects of humility. So, they're aspects of being right-sized in nature and correct perspective. So, when we get rid of humility, guess what? We become selfish. We become self-centered. We become the most important thing in the world to us. And guess what? When that happens, we lose virtue. We lose truth. We lose the attitude of service we've talked about so much on this podcast. We lose the ability to be God-centered and others-centered and to be of service to those in our lives. We become selfish and self-centered. And we lose the truth and we lose the goodness of living then. Because we become selfish and self-serving as well. We just take actions that make us feel better. We throw our friends under the bus. We have pointless conversations. We try to just get accepted by a group we don't even know. We tell ridiculous stories that are offensive to some because we want to do it. Now, that's not virtuous. That's not living in the pursuit of truth and love and God. That is not where we want to be. So when we're arrogant and egotistical and self-centered, we will always lose the truth. Remember that. We will always lose the truth. We become disconnected from what's truly important. Living a spiritual life is to embrace virtue and pursue truth. And all these behaviors that we're talking about, this levity, this irreverent speech, does the exact opposite. So if you can remember that, when you begin to practice this step, when you begin to implement this step into your day-by-day life, it doesn't mean it will be easy. But if you're somebody that wants to be a person of virtuous character, that wants to live in truth and love, then you must practice this step. Because that's what living spiritually is actually about, right? And you've bought into this. This is what you want to do. This is where you want to be. That's why you follow along on this podcast. That's why you do the things that you do, and you read the books that you read, and then you take the actions that you take, and you have the conversations that you have, because you want to grow spiritually, which is the development of virtue and practice of virtue and the pursuit of truth. Now, I want to read the last part of that second paragraph. And it states, irreverence is degrading even in the young, but when it accompanies gray hairs and appears in the demeanor of the preacher, this is indeed a piteous spectacle. And when this can be imitated and followed after, then the blind are leading the blind. Then have elders and preacher and people lost their way. Now, we see that all the time today, don't we? Right? It kind of, Alan's, in general, I mean, an overview of that is he's saying that, hey, it's never good to be irreverent with your speech. It's never good to be disrespectful, no matter who you are, right? But he points out first, he says it's degrading even in the young. But it almost feels like it's almost expected in the young. The young will always try to minimize the importance of the elders. They will always try to grow in, or try to place themselves above and find their place and find an understanding, right? When they're ignorant to the functioning of the world. And when I was ignorant to the functioning of the world, I can tell you, I was very irreverent. I disregarded and discredited and disrespected a lot of people that could have been mentors for me, right? So it's almost expected in the young. And it's not good even when they have it. And it needs to be addressed in a healthy way, right? It needs to be, the awareness needs to be brought to it. They need to be, I know I needed people to instruct me, to teach me on how to live, right? And give appropriate reverence to things and respect to things and dignity and honor to things, right? I didn't know how to do that. I didn't see the worth of it. But I was given that guidance by people that had come before me, and I was open to it. But he goes on to say, if we're seeing this in adults, this type of living, this type of levity, this type of irreverent speech, then it's the blind leading the blind. We're We're supposed to develop this understanding of the gravity of our speech and the importance of giving things due respect and honor. And when we are teaching those a lack of that, that is a problem. When we are teaching people to not practice reverence to human beings, to institutions, to the dead, we have an issue. This is a behavior that needs to be replicated. The virtuous behavior, but either one will be. Reverence will be replicated, irreverence will be replicated. I think we're seeing that right now in society in a lot of ways. We're seeing reverence being destroyed and irreverence being practiced in some areas, and then we're seeing irreverence being discarded and reverence being picked back up in others. And people are realizing there's a place for reverence, there's a place for respect, there's a place for dignity and honor. There's a place for venerable practices. We don't need to be the blind leading the blind. We get to embody the practice. Now, how do we do that? Always the best part. That's not true. This is always a good part, though, where we get, because this is a replacement. I can't sit here and tell you, don't make these jokes, don't practice these stories, don't have these frivolous conversations, don't throw your friends under the bus. To simply say don't do that would be nice, but we need to have a set of practices we need to go and incorporate, right? Like most. So the virtuous man will be of grave and reverent speech. Grave and reverent speech. He will think and speak of the absent as he thinks and speaks of the dead, tenderly and sacredly. He will put away thoughtlessness and will watch that he does not sacrifice his dignity to gratify a passing impulse to lightness and frivolity. What beautiful instructions. That's not even all of them. We got a second half of the paragraph to go eventually, but what beautiful instructions this is, right? Grave and reverent speech. We will practice grave and reverent speech, right? We will speak with the deepest regard and the utmost respect for everything in our lives. We will practice appropriate application of reverence, right? We will give the same dignity and respect we give the dead, we will give to the living. A lot of people don't practice that. A lot of people won't give somebody, they say, give them their flowers, give them their respect until they've passed away. Don't do that. Speak to those who are not present, or those present, not present, and those passed away with reverence and dignity, right? Speak with tenderly and sacredly, right? These are human beings. These are souls. These are individuals we're talking about. Regardless of your opinion on their choices, their beliefs, their previous actions, their old lifestyles, these are still human beings. And some people lose the mark on this. And I know sometimes some human beings, it is difficult to practice this. The grave and reverent speech, to speak of people tenderly and sacredly, to honor the individual of every single person. It is not always easy, but we should always hold sacredness in regards to other people, because other human beings deserve it. And that's also how a spiritual life would dictate us be. We don't only practice virtues when it's convenient. Remember that. We practice virtue at all times, with all people, in all situations, and all circumstances. We don't throw people under the bus. We don't disrespect others just to entertain ourselves or to get a little bit of a win with the crowd. We don't try to prop our own ego up on the backs of someone else's vulnerability and disrespect. We resist the urge to join in and be a part of those types of conversations. We practice virtue. We practice dignity. We practice respect. We practice reverence. We practice intention. He says again in this, he will put away thoughtlessness. Again, be intentional about what you are saying. Be productive and purposeful with what you are saying and how you say it. Know why you are saying something. It has to have purpose. Be very specific about your speech. It matters. Oh, and I want to say something that kind of went back to the 4 examples. And it said, let me see. The telling of vulgar stories having no other purpose than to raise an empty laugh. If the telling of a vulgar story, that would imply was for a purpose, if it was an appropriate place to tell it, to recount something, to learn from something, to gain insight into something, then there might be a time and a place for it at the appropriate, respectable occasion and in the right circumstances with the right people around, right? Some vulgar things do need to be discussed, but not for entertainment purposes, but for an opportunity for growth and learning, right? So that's why I kind of brought it into right here. What you say, how you say it, when you say it, and who you say it, and who you say it to matters. The purpose for which you say something matters. Don't ever forget that. People like to be so casual and flippant with their tongues and their words and their thoughts and their actions, but everything matters. When you realize that everything matters, you can change your life. You can change your life. Now, the second half and the last reading is his mirth will be pure and innocent, and his voice will become subdued and musical, and his soul will be filled with grace and sweetness as he succeeds in conducting himself as he becomes a man of truth. Now, what a lovely thing. I'm so happy that he wrote mirth, and it's interesting they translated it to humor, but so the joyousness, like he acknowledged we're still going to be joyous, we're still going to laugh, we're still going to be a part of the world and conversation, and there is a place for merriment, there is a place for joy, there is a place for happiness, but it should not be brought in at the expense of others, at the expense of a serious conversation, at the fulfillment of your own uncomfortable emotion. Mirth, merriment, happiness, joyousness, freedom, those are all beautiful things that come along with practicing a virtuous lifestyle, and they actually come along in their most fullest form when you're practicing a virtuous lifestyle without the expense of someone else's dignity or someone else's confidence, with appropriate conversation. A lot of us feel like without the crude jokes and the vulgar stories and the, will we ever laugh again? And if you think that, you want to take a look at why you think that. If your entire social standing is built on your repertoire and your bolstered broad amount of crude and dirty jokes, you might want to take a look at what you're doing. You might want to take a look at your intentions and take a look at your character then, because there's so much more that we can participate in and be a part of when we let those things go. And I like how he talks about when we're practicing these virtues, reverence and dignity and respect, right? When we speak with grave and reverent speech and we consider everyone tenderly and sacred, it will be noticeable in our voice. Our voice will be softer, more subdued. The harshness will be taken out of our voice, right? It'll have a joyousness to it. It'll have a lightness to our voice. And that he uses the word musical here, which I think is interesting. You know, that music to my ears type of thing. That's what I thought of. And it has a different tone, a different flow to it when we take all of this irreverent speech out. There's so much more dignity and respect and honor. And then the last thing, because we always talk about it, right? You change the external, you change the mind, you change the soul. And he says that conducting himself as he becomes a man of truth, he will be filled with grace and sweetness. That's what we become filled with when we practice these. When we get rid of this irreverent speech and levity, we become filled with grace and sweetness. We change in our hearts. We change in our souls. And we become and we embody a man of truth. Isn't that what we're going for here? Isn't that the point of having these conversations? Isn't that the point of changing the way we behave and changing the way we think and taking a love and service-oriented heart and soul with us every area we go, every place we go, every person we interact with? Is to become a man of truth. That is our greatest aim. That is our greatest aim. So, all right, well, that brings us to the end of the 6th lesson here, and heck of a lesson, wasn't it? A lot of definitions, a lot of good words, and a lot of just such good, relevant information that I think a lot of people are going to be surprised to get. So I thank you all for joining me. I thank you all for listening and being a part of it, and I hope you come back and join us for the last lesson on disciplining our tongues, which is the overcoming of captiousness and fault-finding speech. This is going to be a good one to end on, too. That's probably just as good as this one. So thank you all for joining me, and until next time, thanks.